They say your 10th wedding anniversary is supposed to be a milestone, a celebration of love that stood the test of time. I thought that's what we were doing, good food, close friends, laughter echoing through the restaurant. But that night didn't end with cake and champagne. It ended with silence, shattered trust, and a name I'll never forget. Want to hear how it really went down? The evening had all the right ingredients: dim candlelight, the soft clink of wine glasses, the low hum of jazz playing overhead. We booked a private room at one of the nicest restaurants in town. It wasn't just about luxury, it was about creating a moment. 10 years of marriage felt like something worth honoring, especially in front of the people who'd walked parts of that journey with us. Emily looked stunning that night. Her dark green dress fit her like it was made just for her, and her hair was curled in soft waves that brushed her shoulders every time she laughed. I couldn't help but smile watching her interact with our guests, confident, graceful, magnetic. The kind of woman people naturally gravitate toward. And she was mine. Or so I thought. I'd spent weeks planning the whole thing. Reserved the venue, coordinated with friends flying in, picked out the exact wine she loved from Napa. I even made a playlist of songs that meant something to us over the years, from the track that played during our first dance to that cheesy pop song she used to blast in the car on road trips. I wanted every detail to speak to the life we'd built together. People were in good spirits, laughing, telling stories, raising toasts. I remember looking around the table and feeling proud, not of myself, but of us. We weren't perfect, but who is? We'd made it through some tough years, the stress of buying our first house, Emily's job layoffs, even a miscarriage early in our marriage that nearly broke us both. And yet, here we were, still standing. Or so I thought. It wasn't until dessert was being served that something shifted. Emily got quiet. She was smiling, sure, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Her phone lit up once, then twice. She peeked at it quickly, angled slightly away from me. I leaned in to say something. I think I asked if she wanted a bite of my creme brulee, but she just nodded absently and gave me one of those tight, polite smiles that you give to strangers at the DMV. That's when I noticed the way she clutched her phone. Not casual, not careless like she usually was. She was guarding it. And when the screen lit up again, just for a flash, I caught a glimpse of the message. "Good night, babe." My heart dropped into my stomach. Now, let me be clear. I didn't leap to conclusions. I didn't make a scene or jump to fury. Not yet. But my body reacted before my brain did. My hands got clammy, and I felt the blood rush to my face. I excused myself, blaming too much wine, and walked toward the restroom with a calm I didn't feel. On the way, I passed the coat rack. There it was, her phone, slipped inside the pocket of her beige trench coat hanging on the back of her chair. Unlocked. I stood there for a second, staring at it like it was a live wire. Part of me wanted to keep walking. Maybe just breathe, splash some water on my face, and come back to the table with a forced smile. But something deeper, older, more instinctual pushed me. And so I reached for it. And that's when everything I thought I knew about my marriage began to unravel. My fingers trembled as I slid the phone from Emily's coat pocket. I told myself I just wanted confirmation, proof that I wasn't overreacting, that maybe babe was just some ridiculous inside joke with a friend or a family member I hadn't met. But deep down, I already knew. You don't feel that kind of dread unless something real is buried underneath. The screen was still lit. No passcode. No fingerprint lock. Just open. Vulnerable. Like her life had been, apparently. I scrolled up. The messages weren't vague. They weren't friendly. They weren't even romantic in a way you could excuse as emotional confusion. They were raw, intimate, full of desire and familiarity that comes only from repetition. I read things I never imagined my wife would write, certainly not to someone named Mark. Mark, a coworker, apparently. She had his name saved with a heart emoji and a nickname, My Escape. That stung more than I expected. Not my love or baby or anything generic. My escape. From what? From me? From our life? There were dates and times. Reservations. A photo of her in the very same dress she was wearing that night, captioned, "Can't wait to take this off for you later, winking face dot." I couldn't breathe. You always think you'll react with fury when you catch someone cheating. That you'll throw the phone, punch a wall, scream into the void. But in that moment, I just felt hollow. Like someone had scooped the air right out of my lungs and replaced it with static. How long had this been going on? Weeks? Months? Longer? And worse, how many times had I kissed her goodnight while she was texting this man? How many mornings had we made coffee together while she sent him selfies in the bathroom? How many times had she looked at me, smiled, and said, "I love you," with his fingerprints still fresh on her skin? I sat down on a bench near the hallway, still holding her phone. I stared at it like it could answer every question I was too scared to ask. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, drag her out of the restaurant, demand an explanation, expose every lie. But another part of me didn't want to see her face. Didn't want to hear her deny it, or worse, admit it casually like it was inevitable. I felt small, insignificant, like a background character in a life I thought I was co-writing. And then came the anger. The sharp, blinding anger. It wasn't theatrical or explosive. It was cold, focused, clear. I stood up, slipped the phone back into her coat, and walked slowly back toward the dining room. The noise of laughter and clinking glasses hit me like a wave. They were all still there, our friends, our family. People who had rooted for us, supported us, celebrated us. People who'd driven hours, even flown in, just to raise a glass in our honor. I looked across the room and saw Emily laughing at something her sister said, eyes sparkling, her hand gently resting on the stem of her wine glass like everything was fine. Like we were fine. And that's when I made the decision. Not out of revenge, not out of pettiness, but out of clarity. I wasn't going to bottle this up. I wasn't going to protect her image or shield her from the fallout she created. I deserved better than that. So I tapped my glass, and everything went quiet. The sound of my fork tapping the side of my glass echoed louder than I expected. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Every eye in the room turned toward me. Emily looked up, smiling at first, probably expecting some sweet, rehearsed speech. Maybe a sentimental toast about 10 years of love, laughter, and all the things we'd survived together. Her eyes softened like they always did when she thought I was about to be romantic. But I wasn't. I cleared my throat and raised my glass. My voice came out even, calm, too calm, maybe. It wasn't shaking with rage or sadness. It was steady, razor-sharp, and it cut through the room like a cold breeze. I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. It means a lot to have all of you, our closest friends and family, here to celebrate this milestone with us. 10 years of marriage, that's no small thing. I saw her straighten a little in her seat, lifting her glass halfway in anticipation. That smile still on her lips. That same damn smile. I continued. It's been a journey, filled with ups and downs. But tonight, I learned something new, something that changed the way I look at everything we've built. A couple of guests shifted uncomfortably. I caught Emily's smile falter for the first time. Her eyes darted toward me. She knew. She didn't know how much I knew, but she knew something wasn't right. I let the silence stretch just long enough. And so I want to offer a special thank you, I said, lifting my glass a little higher. To Mark, for keeping my wife entertained when I wasn't around. Emily, you really know how to make an anniversary unforgettable. And with that, I set the glass down, turned, and walked out. The room behind me was silent, then a flurry of confused voices. A few gasps. Someone dropped their fork. I didn't wait to see what Emily did. I didn't look back. Outside, the air hit me like a slap, cool, grounding. I walked around the corner of the restaurant and leaned against the brick wall, my chest heaving like I'd just run a marathon. My heart wasn't racing from adrenaline. It was from relief. Painful, brutal relief. Inside, I'd given up protecting the lie. I'd let go of the part of me that still hoped there was some mistake, some reasonable explanation. There wasn't. And now, everyone knew. I don't remember how long I stood there. 5 minutes? 10? I heard the door swing open behind me eventually. It was her. Jason, what the hell was that? She hissed, her heels clicking across the pavement toward me. I didn't look at her. You read my phone, she said, her voice shaking with both anger and panic. That's a total invasion of privacy. I laughed, dry and bitter. You're right. I should have waited until you handed me divorce papers to find out you were screwing your coworker. Her eyes welled up with tears. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. I finally turned to face her. You humiliated yourself the moment you decided to betray me. I just stopped covering for you. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her face crumpled, and she looked down at the pavement. I walked past her, toward my car. I'll be in touch, I said flatly. But tonight? Tonight I'm done pretending. And just like that, I drove off into the night. The image of her standing under that flickering streetlight burned into my memory, not as my wife, but as the woman who chose to be someone else's escape. The drive home was silent, save for the faint hum of tires against the pavement. No music, no thoughts, just a hollow kind of stillness. I parked in the driveway, turned off the engine, and sat there with my hands on the wheel, staring blankly at the garage door like it might offer me some direction. Our house felt different when I walked inside. Not physically, it was the same furniture, same dim kitchen light left on, but emotionally, it felt like someone had gone through and scraped out everything warm, leaving only the frame behind. I didn't even bother turning on more lights. I dropped my keys on the counter, took off my jacket, and sank into the couch like a man twice my age. My phone buzzed nonstop for the next hour. Some were from friends who had been at the dinner, unsure what to say, but reaching out anyway. Some were checking if I was okay. A couple were blunt. Holy SHT, man, that was brutal, but damn. Asterisk others were more cautious. Maybe you should have handled that in private. Her sister texted me, too. She said she didn't know what to say, that she was sorry I had to find out like that. I appreciated her honesty, even if it was just a single sentence. Then there were the messages from Emily. Dozens of them. At first, they were full of shock and fury. How dare you humiliate me like that? I can't believe you did that in front of everyone. But the tone quickly shifted. By the fifth or sixth message, her anger cracked, replaced by panic and sadness. Please come home. Can we talk? I made a mistake. But I didn't reply. Not that night. I didn't trust myself to. The next morning, the silence between us hung heavy like wet clothes on a line. She stayed at her sister's house, but not before coming home in the early hours to pack a small overnight bag. I was upstairs, pretending to sleep, listening to every zipper and drawer like they were landmines. She cried while she packed. I could hear it. Soft, but unmistakable. And maybe a few weeks ago, I might have gone downstairs, wrapped my arms around her, and asked why. But now, I couldn't even will myself to get out of bed. Over the next few days, the reactions kept rolling in. Friends were split. Some said I did what any man in my shoes would have done, maybe even less than what they would have done. Others called it a public spectacle. Said I should have kept it private. That what I did might have burned bridges with people who didn't know how to process it. And honestly, I get it. It wasn't classy. It wasn't polished or mature. But I didn't plan to make a scene. I reacted to the pain in real time, raw and unfiltered. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't swallow it down to make someone else feel better. What struck me most, though, were the quiet ones. The people who said nothing during the dinner, didn't text right after, but reached out a few days later. One buddy I hadn't seen in months sent a simple message. Saw what happened. I'm here if you need to talk. That one hit differently. It reminded me that even when your world falls apart publicly, there are people willing to show up for the cleanup quietly, without judgment. Emily and I didn't speak for almost a week. Not directly, anyway. Just a couple of short emails about the dog and the mail. I wasn't sure where we were heading, or if there was anything even left to salvage. But I knew one thing for sure. Things would never go back to how they were. Not after what I saw. Not after what I felt. And maybe that was the point. A week passed. Then two. And somehow, through the wreckage, Emily and I found ourselves sitting across from each other at the kitchen table one morning, the same place we'd shared coffee 1,000 times before, only this time, the silence was heavier, loaded with things neither of us knew how to say. She looked tired. Worn out, not just from the lack of sleep, but from the weight of what had unraveled between us. Her eyes were puffy, her voice quieter than usual. I didn't plan it, she whispered, not meeting my gaze. It just happened. That line. It just happened. I'd heard it before from friends, from movies, from every sorry excuse people give when they don't want to own the damage they've done. But in that moment, I didn't yell. I didn't throw her words back at her. I just nodded, because truthfully, I didn't need more details. I already had all the clarity I needed. But then came the part that threw me off. She didn't want a divorce. I don't want to lose what we had, she said. What we have. I sat with that for a long time. Part of me wanted to laugh. Another part wanted to scream. But instead, I said, then why did you risk it for someone else? She didn't have an answer. Just more tears. And a silence that said she didn't know either. That's when I realized something important. She wasn't asking me to stay because she was sure of her love. She was asking me to stay because she was terrified of what came next. Of the guilt, the shame, the loneliness. Of starting over at 34 with a wrecked marriage and no moral high ground left to stand on. And yet, I didn't leave. Not because I forgave her. Not because I was weak or still blindly in love. But because true healing rarely looks like the dramatic exits we see in movies. Sometimes, it's two people sitting in the ruins, trying to make sense of what the hell just happened, even if they don't know what comes next. We started therapy, separately at first, then together. Some days, I'd walk out of those sessions feeling like we had a shot. Other days, I'd sit in the car afterward wondering what I was even fighting for. But we kept showing up, and I guess that's something. Our friends are still split. A few respect my decision. Others think I'm crazy for even trying to work things out. She made her choice. Man, one buddy told me bluntly, "Why are you giving her another chance?" Fair question. One I ask myself every day. But here's the truth. Love doesn't always leave clean. Sometimes it clings to the edges, sharp and painful. And maybe there's still a version of us buried beneath the mess, one worth digging out, even if it takes time. I don't know what we'll look like a year from now. Maybe we'll come out stronger. Maybe we'll fall apart anyway. But for now, we're still here. Two broken people trying to figure out whether the pieces still fit. I can't promise a happy ending, but I can promise I'm not pretending anymore. And sometimes, that's the first real step forward. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you have walked out, ended it all, or try to rebuild what was broken? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know how you'd handle it. And if you felt even a fraction of what I went through, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know you're with me, that I'm not alone in this. Your support means more than you know, and who knows, maybe the next chapter of this story will surprise us both.